Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to our DIGFM meeting, or Filemaker user group in the Bay Area. And this is a follow-up presentation to a presentation I gave in February at DIGFM, part 1. So I'm going to share my screen. Can someone confirm that they see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Cool.
Yep.
Awesome. Let's see here. Let's see, make this bigger. There we go. And so, because it's a small group and the topic can, be something worth discussing amongst us, feel free at any time just to jump in, unmute yourself, and just ask a question at any point in time. There's a shortcut for unmuting yourself. If you're in WebEx, just hold the space bar down, speak, and then let go. You're automatically unmuted while you hold the space bar, and you can ask a question. So, okay, I gave this presentation already, and there's a lot to discuss when it comes to transactions. And so this second part is going to be a follow-up to that presentation. There's a few slides here about me, so let me get those out of the way. I work at Beezwax. I am the Director of FileMaker Development at Beezwax. We have a blog that people frequent, and a lot of people like and often share the content that is on that blog. And we have a lot of talented people at Beezwax, which I'm very grateful to, and humbled to be able to work with a large team of talented people there that contribute great ideas and content, and they make that available on our blog. So if you want to meet some of the bees, you can meet them at the Meet the Bees page. There are, let's see here, there are different ways that you can reach me, and I'll repost those different methods that you can reach me at the end of the slide. I'm a father. I've got 2 kids. They keep me incredibly busy, and it's been an interesting year, to say the least. Things that I like hiking, biking, traveling, architecture, precision engineering, sharp knives, and parking backwards. Now, the parking backwards thing is very interesting because I often refer to this. Steve Senfit-Herrera recently actually gave me a different perspective on this in terms of parking backwards, and something that now I think of in terms of really it depends. And normally I think of parking backwards in this mindset of being ready. And so it kind of relates to this topic of transactions where you want to have the most efficient way to deliver the data. But Steve, who's also a musician, and who sometimes when we didn't have COVID would have to drive to a gig, and would have to drive to a gig like, to get to the gig early and to find a parking spot. The idea is that maybe there's a lot of traffic and it's really busy, and he has to get, settled and into the gig as soon as possible. And finding a spot quicker is better than taking the time to back into a spot for different reasons, right? So, and the other reason is sometimes you want to be able to have access to your trunk so that you don't have access to your trunk so easily when it's backed up to a wall to get your gear out. So he really changed my perspective on the way I think about this idea of parking backwards and how it relates to anything that we do in FileMaker. So really now this topic is really something worthwhile looking at in the context of anything that you're working on. So it really depends. Part 1 And I'm not looking at the chat. So if people are posting things on the chat or whatnot, I don't see them right now. So Eric, if there's any questions or anybody has a question, feel free to just unmute.
Oh,
So
we're just all concurring on the being able to back out.
oh yeah,
Or
there's
back on the,
actually a funny website called fancyparking.com, and it's kind of neat to look at. So part one, we kind of looked at native FileMaker development, what things you need to consider when you're doing transactions, and I talked about the network monitor tool and how I used to use that very often, and now we have the opportunity to use something else called release debug, and how you can use that tool to help you measure traffic and the number of calls and the duration of the calls, and this can be done on both Mac and Windows. And part one also talked about delivering the data, finding ways to denormalize data so that maybe there's better ways to deliver it for faster performance. But and a transactional refresher in terms of like, how do transactions really work in FileMaker? I showed a transactional delete example, and then I showed some entering some data. Now, the main part of this first part was mostly about drilling in the idea of measuring. So if you can measure, then you can look at what you currently have, measure that, do some changes, and then measure the improved version, so to speak, and see how much improvement you're actually getting. Part two, we're looking at transactions versus native. We'll look at a definition of that. And then we'll look at some free stuff that we're getting from FileMaker and what we're getting with the benefits of M1 or Apple Silicon. Level of difficulty, we'll talk about the benefits of release debug. Transactional opportunities, and I see those as three different opportunities where you have the opportunity to store data. So you can move from unstored calcs to stored calcs. You can do auditing as part of the transaction, and you can look at a way to approach record locking. And so when it comes to the easy and the hard, these are the hard things to do. And I'll talk about the easy side when we get into the demo. And so yeah, that's it. So let's look at some definitions. Traditional definition of transaction is an input message to a computer system that must be dealt with as a single unit of work. In FileMaker terms, the ability to create, update, or delete data or record, like data on records, all as one atomic transaction. Native FileMaker inherently already transactional. So when you basically editing a record in a portal, you've locked the parent and the related record at the same time. And so you're doing that already, and FileMaker is handling that already without any knowledge, on your own. It's just already happening. So if you go enter browse mode, go to layout, find a record, create an update or delete a record, you are in a sense locking that record and updating that record or deleting that record. So while you're editing that record, you've locked it so no one else can change it. So we'll talk about locks a little bit later and how that moving the transactions can, will also be, it will just work transparently, but if you do something different, you have to take that into account. Okay, some free stuff. So over the years, FileMaker has improved the caching, and we get those improvements for free simply by being on the latest version. And I'll show a slide here coming up. This was a kind of one of the favorite quotes that Robert node presented a few months back. There are only two hard things in computer science: cache invalidation and naming things. So FileMaker manages this cache that we're talking about here. And so when you open a file for the first time, it caches this, this all the structure of the file and even the data. And when you open it for the second time, it takes advantage of the cache. So if you look at that's the attribution of the quote. If I look at this,
Well, I had a quick question,
yeah.
Vince.
Mhm.
That comes for free if you have client or server, or do you have to have both?
Well, it comes for free for client. I don't know about server, how the cache works on server, if it's similar. But it's for free. Basically, if you're, the latest version that I'm using is 19. And I think they started introducing some of these changes to the cache, I think in version 16. And it's been incrementally getting better and better. And so if you have a client and they open up a hosted file, the first time you'll let's say it takes 10, 15 seconds to open the file. The second time they open the file, you'll definitely notice a snappier login, and things just getting into the file is very different. And if you use release debug, you can actually see those differences. And so here's kind of like a before and after. And what I did in this file is I flattened the debug.log output into the same rows, so I could see the bytes sent and the bytes received on the call, so that it's all on one row. Some calls just have a call, but they don't have a or they just have one send or receive, but they don't have like a corresponding record, so to speak. But I tried to map these so that they would be flattened, so I could see it all on one row, like the total duration, the number of bytes, and sent up and the bytes sent down, and the description of what it's doing. And so if you look in the top window, you'll see that the number of bytes sent, let's see, is 14,384. It's more bytes sent on the bottom window, but the bytes received is much, much smaller. And it's 10 seconds versus 107 seconds. And so everything there, like if I map these out in Keynote here just to show these numbers so that you can see visually the impact that it has. So 10 seconds versus 107 seconds, which is just, minute and a half roughly, or almost 2 minutes, to 10 seconds to open the file. So big difference. And we get all this, we get this just for free. The first time you log in, obviously it's going to take a while, but you've gotten some improved performance benefit for that. But there's more cool stuff. So, and it's not beer. I've been playing around with the Apple Silicon machine. I bought one in December, and I am like totally amazed. It's an incredible machine, and I can't wait for what's coming next. But the machine itself is incredible in terms of battery life and performance. But if it translates into what the machine is capable of, and we're going to see some really exciting speed improvements in general across the board for using this hardware. So very, very cool, very excited. Okay, so talking about level of difficulty, I break it out into easy and difficult. And The easy stuff is just the create, update, delete. That's like really easy, and you'll see in the demo. You know, anyone with a little bit of understanding of FileMaker can actually do stuff transactionally. Really not hard at all. Where it gets really difficult very quickly is locking. So if you want to, especially in the method that we use, you like if you wanted to control record locking and know that data's changed, locking and controlling the and understanding what's locked and warning people of those changes, etc. That's hard. The other piece that's hard is to do the auditing at the time of the transaction. And the last piece that's the hardest, I think, is to move from unstored to stored. And so we'll look at that. Basically know the rules and when and how to break them. So in the first presentation in February, we had Matt Petrosky join us, and he was, when I went into my graph, and he was kind of like wondering, hey, did you put those in your graph? Like, how did you do that? Basically, you can put emojis anywhere. And so you can put emojis in your script steps, in your comments. You can put emojis on your relationship graph. And basically this is just an emoji. That's just text. This is just text, but it's just an underscore. And so you can spruce up your relationship graph to show visuals and organize it a little bit better. So that's just something that I thought was cool to mention. Okay, so let's look at some of these demos. Okay, so let me go over here and all right. Okay, so lately I've been kind of really excited to build these like animated videos that describe these topics I cover. So typically, just a quick refresher. If I have FileMaker's server and two connected users and they're both looking at a record, if you know, the user A modifies the record, there's a lock that the server puts on that record, and the user B is not able to make any changes to that record until the lock is released. So when the changes are committed, then the user B will get the refresh data sent to them by the server, and so that's how, you know, FileMaker will manage that. We'll keep track of the lock for you and update that record when it's done. When we went down this road and started to build things that we wanted to do them transactionally, we have first started with maybe what I would call semi-transactional. It was not really fully transactional, but so we started down this road where if user A has a record, maybe one or two records in two different windows, and let's say, you know, to edit the data, we put the data in a popover or in a popover into global fields, right? And we had it with a popover first. We eventually switched over to a card, but we put that data in globals, and that's, you know, then we package up the data and we send it to the server to transact on that record, and that's fine. It works well if you only have a single window interface. If you have two windows where the user can edit the record, then you have crosstalk between the globals. And the crosstalk then would happen such that, let's say, record 2 was edited, and then a user wanted to also edit record 1. If they opened record 1 and wanted to edit it, now they've populated the globals in both of those windows with the latest window. And if they were to save record 2, they're basically saving the data from record 1 on record 2. So that was bad. And so we then started to explore an opportunity where we could have, like, let's say, our own cache, so to speak. And what we did was, this is kind of like fast forwarding to what we do now. And what we do is, in a hosted file, we'll have a container that includes a FileMaker file inside that container. And on open, we deploy what is called a local file. And we establish what is into the hosted file, a variable file reference to that deployed file. And it could be anywhere on the user's machine. Usually we put it in the temp directory. And that file is then, tables in that file are then aliased on the graph. And whenever layouts are based on those tables, basically they are editing data in a local file. There's no traffic going to the server. So, so let's say there's a record that the user wants to edit that that is on, let's say, on the hosted system, and we install a card window. We take the data from that record and we put it into a record that is in this local file, and we fill out those fields, and this solves the problem where if you have two records, right? So now in this window, this card window here, this data is on a record in the local file. And if you look down here, there's a second record, and now there's another card window, and this card window is for a record, another record in the local file. And these ones don't talk to each other. They're just local, but they're connected to the window that is the record that is in the hosted file. And the same approach, basically, save the package, we package up the data as JSON, we send it to the server. Same thing, we transact it on the server. And this, again, this model gets rid of our issue where we had the crosstalk. Okay, so moving on to talk about locking. But before I do that, I just want to see if there's any questions from anybody.
Not necessarily a question, but we used a very similar technique years ago on a very large, complex file. So we did the same thing, exported a local file. Luckily, users had kind of their own records, so they would be the only one who needed to interact with one at a time. We just pulled down all the data they needed to update, and then they just sent it back up to the server. In this case, there was everybody would come out of a meeting and all be doing kind of the same thing, but to different records. And there was a lot of server-side processing, so it sped things up exponentially.
Cool, cool. Yeah, the thing about locks is, so this came up in another discussion. So typically when you're editing a record, you've locked it, so no one else can make the changes. But in this model, because I pull the data from the record into the local record, and I'm editing it locally, I have a copy of that data. And you know, I could get busy, I could get on a phone call, someone else comes along, makes a change to the data on the hosted system, and now I want to send my changes, but the record has already changed. So this is something, one approach that you could take, and that is you could build hashes of the data that you're wanting to change, and you then can compare different ways. So you could build a hash of the current state, which is the state that the data for those fields that you're allowing the user to edit is on the server at the time of the transaction. You can build the future state, which is the state of the data that you want it to be because you made changes to it, and this is the future state. And then the past state is the state that the hash of the data as it was when you pulled the data to make changes to it. And then you can compare in different ways. You can compare if the future state is not equal to the past state. So meaning that you, if it's the same, you haven't made any changes. All you need to do is just close the card window and you're done. But if it is different, then you can then send it to the server, and then when at the time of the transaction, you could compare the past, the future state, the past state to the current state, and see if another user made changes to the fields that you were editing. And if they did, then you could basically warn the user to say, you know, the data changed. Would you like to submit your changes, or would you like to review the changes that were made by someone else? And the benefit of building the hashes is that you have more granularity, and you could build the hashes on just parts of field, like just a subset of fields, and it doesn't have to be all the fields. So you could also rely on get record modification count, but record modification count doesn't give you this kind of granularity of getting a hash just on like some of the fields that, let's say, one user would have access to change, let's say, the name and address of a record, but another user would have access from another privilege to change the, let's say, the courses that a user has, or something, some other information. And so they might be different parts of the record. And so even if you maybe relied on get record modification count, it might be okay that some part of the record got changed for other purposes, and you're only dealing with some other changes and no changes were made on those fields. So you know, you have a lot of options here, and so you can kind of mix these together to get the right mix of what you need. Because we do a lot of auditing, for us, we don't build the hashes, we just audit. So we can show who changed it when, and if that history is there, then the user's happy with seeing who changed it and when, rather than locking it out. But you know, again, it depends, and every project is different. So that's this video. Let me move on to the next one. Any questions about locks? Okay, so this one here, this video is just showing what we have as overhead in terms of how we build these. And so basically, we'll have a transaction table, and it has about 5 or 6 fields. It has a created at, created by, and then it has a duration, a JSON payload, and an ID, and then a result. And ID is we have only one ID, and it's ID internal, and that is a way that we map to the tables that we want to transact on. And ID internal is kind of the primary key of the records that we want to touch to either create data or edit data. And through the relationship, we're able to, with that option to allow creation of related records, we can either create data or resolve data to an existing record so that we can edit the data, or we can delete the data. So in this case, we have an example of a table of projects and tasks, and typically on our relationship graph, we'll have a table occurrence for transaction, and transaction is connected to a table occurrence for task and a table occurrence for project. And as we'll see in an example later, all we do is when we unpack our JSON, we update the ID internal to the key that we want to interact with for that record, and we just keep cycling through the list of keys and the data that we need to update. And as long as we don't commit this transaction record, then everything that we touch in these related records is all under that that transaction. So basically we create a new transaction record, we'll unpack the JSON payload, and then we can create an update through relationships. If any errors that we get along the way, we'll abort, and then nothing is changed. Otherwise, if we commit, all those changes get rolled into there. So here's an example. So on the window on the top left is a transaction table, and it only has one field in it. For purposes of this demo, I'm just using number fields, numeric field. Looks like there's a question. Sorry, is there a question? No, okay. For purposes of this demo, I'm just using a numeric key, but we usually use UUIDs. And
Sorry, Vince.
Yeah.
There was a question, it was in chat. The person said, are you using JSON to transfer binary files?
I believe Brendan is the lead architect on this framework that we're using, and I believe we do use that, but I'd have to confirm. I'm not 100% certain. So I'd have to confirm on that.
Wait, it's possible.
What's that?
Either way, it's possible because FileMaker's calc engine supports converting it to binary and back.
Yes, and we're basically taking that, we're building that JSON object, and we're sending it via PSOS, and then we're transacting it on the server. And that's an important point as well to be made, that we transact it on the server rather than do it locally. It's just much more efficient and quicker to get it done on server. Okay, so getting back to this example, here we have the debugger in the bottom window. We have 2 records in the middle window, 2 users, and a list of their related colors. So if I run the script and I create, the first thing I do is to select the window, and I'll create a new record. So now I have a new record in the transaction table, and the key is not to commit the record while these operations happen. And then what I would do is, in this case, I'm going to the color, and I'm going to fill in a new color. So I'm going to put in a new color for a user, and then so you'll see a new color show up at the bottom there. And then so that's new data. And then for the other examples, I'm going to remove records. So I'm going to start removing some of these records. And what I do basically is populate this ID to the ID that relates to the primary key in the child table. And I make sure then I go into this portal. And so now I have a key that relates to this reddish color. And I'll delete that record. So that record is gone. I'll delete pink, fuchsia is gone. And then we delete scarlet and a few others. Okay, so those are gone now. I'm going to remove a parent record. So this record here in the middle. Let's see, this record here. I'm going to get rid of one of those records. Oops, I got to get rid of this screen so I can see what I'm doing. Okay, so so now we'll point to a record here. That record in the middle is gone. So I had a number of records in here. I got rid of a person record, and I'm gonna, let's see, going to get rid of any other records. And now I am pointing back to, I'm going to update a record. I'm going to change it to burgundy. So that's this record got changed to a different color. And then at the last step here, just before I revert, you'll see that I have 1 record here, 4 records here, and there's 1 transaction record. if I revert now and I run that last step, this record is gone because it never got committed in the first place. My records are all back basically. There is some kind of funky behavior you have to be careful of, and that is we're basically using these portals here to point to make sure that we're targeting the data that is through the relationship. And so we're using go to object, and we're giving each of these fields in these portals an object name. And so that's part of how we target the exact data that we want to touch. But as you can see, this part is pretty easy and straightforward. That's not hard to do. So you were able to create, update, and delete data. And if you roll back, all the data kind of comes back. So it's all transactional. So that part is easy. Any questions about this part?
Hey, Vince,
Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you missed an important step at the beginning.
Okay. Which is what?
That the fields on the left side use relationships to keep the transaction open, and you constantly change the ID and update the records to related records. So that way you can keep the transaction open, and all that will get committed at the same time.
Yes. I mean, in this table, what you're seeing here, this transaction table only has one field in it, and that's this ID field. These two things are portals, and there's two fields. There's the primary key from the child table, and there's a primary key from the parent table. And basically putting in a key here will give me a pointer to, again, if it's a UUID, it's a unique pointer to the record that is its primary key, and then just going into that portal to touch either creating a record, or update or delete a record. So it's all done through a relationship from this one field. And you're right. Basically, in this example, we're kind of looping through and setting these fields, transaction ID, setting it to 1, setting it to 2, etc. But we're basically cycling the IDs in here. We don't have a number of different fields in the transaction table. We only have one key. And once we use one key, if we take that key out and then we substitute a different key, we basically have a pointer to a different record. With a UUID, it's a little bit more apparent. With this, it might be misleading, might be confusing because they're all just numeric IDs. But yeah, it's totally right. And let's see if I can open up that demo file.
I'm not sure about this as well, but the tables on the right-hand side are local, and the table on the transaction table is the remote table, and you're creating a bunch of transactions locally, and then as soon as you commit that record, bam, all the records go up to the server.
Sorry, can you repeat that? What was the question?
I believe the people table and the table on the right is local tables. Is that correct?
Oh, in this case, no. This is just. I'll get to that example in a little bit. These are all hosted. These are all hosted. So these would be all in the main system.
So there's nothing here that's local.
No.
Okay.
Let me go find the other example. So native. I think it's this one. This one here. So this is the idea here, right? So like if you look in the transaction table, transaction table has only one field. And in the relationship, we have that key is from that key to the parent. Okay, so this would be that middle table. Okay, and then we have the same thing from the same key to the child table to the primary key. And so basically imagine if these were UUIDs, they'd be unique across the system. So you pop in a UUID here and it has a pointer to a specific record. Now, it could be, you know, a system that could have like, you know, a number of different tables connected to it, and they're all connected to this one ID. And so this is all, in this example, it was just to illustrate this idea of like the easy part of doing this, to hook this up and make it transactional. So the mechanics of it. Okay, I'll move on to the next demo. Okay, so this is, I'm going to skip over this. This is the release debug stuff. So let me talk about the three things that are hard. And the three hard things that I see, in my opinion, are one, storing values, right? So storing values so that you can move from unstored calcs to stored calcs. And FileMaker aggregation functions do not work on uncommitted records. So if you wanted to have like a count of projects, a count of tasks, when you're doing your new tasks, those new task records are not visible to a FileMaker aggregate function until the record has been committed. So you have this conundrum of, let's say I have 3 tasks right now and I add 2 more. And if I do that transactionally and I want the project now to reflect the total number of tasks, I can't use the FileMaker aggregate functions to get me a total because those new records are not yet visible from the calc engine to be able to count the total number of tasks until that commit happens. So you could use execute SQL, and I believe I've used this in the past, but we're kind of concerned for performance. Execute SQL aggregate functions can come at a cost. So the other way to do this is to calculate the delta and calculate the changes and update based on the delta. So basically, if you know you're adding 2 more tasks, you just add 2 to the number of tasks for the project. And if you're transacting it, and at that moment, then your update should be accurate. The other piece that is hard is taking advantage of the transaction moment to also build in auditing. So the fact that you added this data or deleted the data or edited the data or viewed the data, all this auditing that you want to add on will come at a cost. It will take more time, but it's added value that I think sometimes is very meaningful and useful. We talked about locks already. So, instead use the get container attributes function and use the MD5 to generate a hash for the fields that you want to look at for those edits. So those are the 3 hard things to do. Okay, so that's this one. Let me share. Let's take a look at an example of a prototype that we built to kind of demonstrate this in action. And this is kind of showing you these 2 tables here on the right. These are the local file. So these windows are basically layouts in the local file for a project layout and a task layout. And if we step through this example We will you see here that we have the variable file reference. So that's set on the time of opening the file, and that's pointing to a file in the temp directory. So now what we do is we'll go ahead and we'll create a new project and task. And you see here, it installs a card window. And on installing the card window, we go ahead and create a record in the local file. So this data here, these 3 fields are from this table. And we'll see, we'll fast forward a little bit here, and we'll see that we'll create 3 task records, and I have 3 records in this table. And so these are in the local file. And this card window is in the hosted file. And this layout is based on an occurrence of this table in the graph. So if I go and see if I have it open here, give me 1 second. Let me get it open. Where is it? Okay, so okay, so I have it open here. Let me show you the actual file. So this is the file, and if I look in the graph, the card window is going to be based on this table occurrence here. This table occurrence here and this table occurrence, these both come from the local file. And so if I base a layout off of this table occurrence, and I show related records in the task portal that's there, then basically what I am doing here is I'm showing the record, this record, and these related records, task records, in this window, but this is in the hosted file. And if I click outside the fields and I were to commit the record, there would be no data sent to the server. So for new records, they're just all local. If I were to edit these records, I could do the same thing. I could populate the record and these related records, and there would be no locks. There would be nothing the server would need to manage. So less network traffic. It's all done locally. So if we step forward through here, we'll fill in some data. You'll see that data is starting to fill in over here. We'll go ahead and submit it, and there you have it. That record, basically, when I clicked the button, I packaged up the JSON, I sent it to the server, it unpacked the data and created the project record with its related task records. So one more demo and then we can get into questions. So here's the same thing, except that this time we're going to look at, so we create a record, and then we're going to edit the record. But before we edit the record, this is a view to the transaction log. And so we can see is, if we look at this, we see the amount of time it took, what it did. It created a project record and it created a task record, another 3 task records, and then all the fields, like over here on the right-hand side. So these are all the fields, and each of these are related to, these are all the fields, and so for all the transaction and all, and the before and after values. So there's that. If we edit the project, so now what we did is we loaded the project record, we loaded these 3 records in the local table, and if we make changes to it and send it, now we can see in the transaction log that there was a change. There were 2 edits made, one in the task record, one on the project record, and the changes to the fields. So what's cool about what we have here is what we're using is we have a backend to set up the auditing, and so this is a view to a list of all the tables in the system. And over here, we can simply turn on or off if we want to audit these fields. And this is something that the developer doesn't have to write any code. They just turn on the flag to say, the client wants this data audited, and then once that's done, then that in itself is an audit, and it logs that change. But then when you go in and you make the change to the data, you get to see the audits that happen to that field, yeah. So this piece is the beauty of this is that the coding is all rolled into the processing of the transaction. So what it does is at the point that you submit this, what it does is it packages up all this data, the attributes of all the data for all the fields, the ID of this record, the ID of all these records, and the values of the things that have changed, and it packages that up as JSON and sends it to the server. And then on a server, basically, it takes that, it creates a transaction record, it unpacks the JSON, and then acts on that data. And there's a fair bit of complexity in making sure that those calculations are stored accurately by first locking all the records, and to see if you can get a lock on all the records that you will be transacting on, and then manipulating the data. And if anything were to go wrong, then the whole thing gets rolled back. It just doesn't happen. Yeah, so that's it. I have the file open here if you want to look at anything or talk about anything in here. In a prior meeting, there were questions about managing this local file. We do have some code to basically check out the file, and so the local file is here. It's visible. Here's the local file. And so, for example, if I as a developer needed to add another field to my project table, let's say I needed to add another field in project for some other attribute, I could go in here, I could go in project, and I could say, I have this test field. Let me go call this demo. So I've added a demo field. And in the local file, in the project table, I could add this demo field here, and then in this layout, the important thing about this layout, this is in the hosted file. This is based on project create, and we saw that in the graph, project create is coming from the local file. So any fields I add into that other related file, they'll show up here. So now I have this field here, and I've added it already to my main file, to the hosted table. All I'd have to do is modify the script to include the data for this field, and basically I would be able to interact and transact on that data on that field in the hosted file. And then if I've added this field here, I would go into here and I would upload and check in my local file, which has a new field now. And then the only thing is that users would need to relog into the system, because we deploy a local file every time they open this file. So they wouldn't get this new field until they log back in to the file. And so that's how we manage, managing this local file. Any questions?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, no, I can hear you now.
Yeah, okay. You could fix that easily by setting a flag that everyone reads the next time they pass through some other. So you would set a record with a flag in it somewhere that everyone reads. And as they do some sort of logic, like changing tabs or whatever,
Uh-huh.
you could read that flag and re-download it.
Yeah, the problem is I'd have to test that because once you define a variable file reference, this this variable we would have to, you can't close this file. Like even if I close the file, it's still there, right?
Yeah,
Because
that only happens because there's relationships going
right,
between
right, and
transaction proto and the local file.
yeah, like these table occurrences here, these ones here, these are all coming from the local file. So I mean, yeah, I think there isn't a way to redeploy a new file.
No, no, not based on your current design.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, any other questions? So the debate or discussion that we had in another meeting was if like the local file, like for example, the benefit of the local file. So if you have, let's say, a busy system and you have a lot of users making edits to records, this reduces the amount of locks that the server needs to manage. If you use this approach, let's say, the concern was if you have a lot of activity, to rely on PSOS to perform the transaction, and that there was some concern because if the transaction takes a lot of time and you then you could have PSOS sessions stacking one on top of the other, and when you get too many of those, you get a degradation in performance for everybody on the server. So
I didn't see it.
what we do is we keep track of the duration of all our transactions.
It's over there.
And one of the other things that we had before was that we would have a PSOS log. And so I think we're going to bring that back so that we can monitor how many of these transactions are happening concurrently. Right now, we don't have that insight, and it would be easy enough to add that because this transaction
No.
is triggered to run on server, and it can also check to see other transactions if they haven't completed, how many of those are running concurrently at the time that this started running, and how many are running concurrently at the time that it ended. So we would be able to tell how many are running concurrently either at start or at end, and see if there's any significant overlap. But anything, yeah.
Yeah. The amount of locks ultimately will be the same amount of locks. If you have if you have to edit a record, you're going to have to open it up at some point and edit it, whether or not it's done by the user locally or not. But what you are doing is you're shorting a user could leave that record open for hours.
Right.
And it could affect other users or other things that you're doing. So what you're really doing is shortening dramatically the
Because I'm used to
time that the lock is open.
Yes, correct,
Careful.
correct. The other thing, oops,
Downstairs.
that's my movie. Let's see here, where's that? Right here. No, that's, let me go back. Another thing that we can do is, where
Stick
is
it.
Here. Another thing that we can do is we can also, because we have transactions
Oh, you didn't watch these.
and
Yeah, I did.
we have a
I'm gonna try.
timestamp here. Could someone mute? I'm getting some noise in the background. If you're not okay asking a question. So thank you. In our transaction table, we have a timestamp. And so the first, let's see here, projects. If we select a record and let's say I edit this record, so I'll make a change to this, change this value. Okay, so I just made a change. If I go look on down here, this record here, I had a change that was made. At the what we do is we use the what is it, execute data API, and what we're able to do is we're able to see when the record was created and by who, and when it was modified and by who, right? Because we're getting this data from the transaction for the first time we see a transaction for this record ID, and for the last time we see a transaction for this record ID. And so what that gives us is basically, you know, everything that everybody has in all their tables, like created by, created at, modified by, modified at. We don't have any of those fields in any of these, like, you know, tables. We basically rely on the fact that everything goes through the transaction. And so we save ourselves 4 fields in each table, which if you have a large system, that's pretty significant. And yeah. Yeah, any other questions?
Hey, Vince,
Yeah.
someone had asked if they could see the JSON payload.
Sure, let me see
I'm
if
curious
I can.
about that as well, particularly if there are deletes in there.
There are what?
If there are deletes in the payload, what that looks like.
Let me see if I can, I can get it to show it to you. Let's see. Data on Scratch. So this new record, let's say I lock it and I try and transact on it. Okay. Let's see if I have a record of that failed attempt. Yes, I do. Let's see if I can get the JSON payload. So this is the JSON payload. Let's see if I can put it in window here. Oops. So that's the JSON payload, and so we also have some other overhead for the actual session, so we have the fields that are transacted. Again, if I were to try and delete that record, let's see if I could delete it and get another payload. Delete project. Did I lock that? No, I must have. I can't remember now. Did I lock it or did I not lock it? Tried to delete it. Let me try this one. It shouldn't delete it if I've got it locked. So let me see if that's a bug. Yeah, so there's the lock. Let me go back to, so this is this one. We go to the next one. So this was an edit, and this other one is a delete. Is that what you were asking? To get what the JSON payload looks like for a delete?
Yeah, and I guess I was kind of wondering if you've got a mix of, like, you've got a portal in there or some child records. If you add one and deleted another one, just how that
Okay.
looks and
Yeah,
how it's keeping track of that.
yeah. That's the thing is that I'm not sure how it would on an existing record I could replicate that, because so if I go to here and I delete this row and I add a row and I modify a row, so put in some values. This will fail because obviously I locked the record here, but at least this gives
But
me,
yeah,
because
this is the example I was looking for.
yeah, so this case here, so this one here is a little bit longer. It's hard to present all in one window, but there's definitely parts to it. So yeah, let's see here. There's a delete over here. There's a create a task over here. Yeah, so I mean, this is much, there's definitely a lot more to this than we have time to describe all the bits and pieces and details of the JSON and all the work that's gone in there. But yeah, this is the guts of it, basically.
Vince,
So
is that,
Yeah, it's cool
is
stuff.
that
Thank
the
you.
JSON that's being sent back and forth from FM Data API?
no, this is so at one point we looked to do this via the data API, but then we abandoned that. And the outcome of the data API exploration was actually this part right here. So this was the outcome of the data API exploration. We wanted to do, we wanted to build some interface to be able to have fields that we, like I want to log, create and edit a view or delete on this table. I want to log changes to any one of these fields. So like, for example, this task count is currently not being logged. Okay, so like over here, if I were to edit this project and I delete these two tasks, right? Now I've got two tasks. And if I go look at the transaction log for it, let's see here, and I look at the last record, you'll see that I deleted two tasks and the task average changed. Okay, but if I go here and I say, audit that count of tasks, right? So now I go back and I make a change and I add a task, right? So now what we're going to see is just by turning that on, we now have the task count being changed from 2 to 3. And that's, so initially we had done all this work to roll this into using the data API, and we abandoned it just because it was not going to give us the flexibility that we needed, and it was way too complex. So we stuck with the local file, the JSON payload, and PSOS as the main components of it, and then we grabbed all the work that we did to basically pull this stuff. And this is just using the SQL functions to get the metadata for all the tables. So before, in the project table, I added the demo field. If I just sync this table, you'll see this field show up here. Oh, did I add it? Let me see. I thought I added it. Is it in this table? demo. Yes, it should be there. Oh, there it is. Yeah. So, so this is just using the underlying FileMaker execute SQL to get the metadata for all the tables and fields. And then once we get that, the user can either turn on or off any of the auditing that they want, and that's all built into the part of the transaction process, so to speak. And so the only kind of the one thing that the developer has to be aware to do is to refresh this. You could do it for this table or new tables or all tables, and it refreshes all the fields that are in the hosted file. So if I were to remove this demo field from here, basically that just would be that would get removed. Oops. Okay, so that's gone. So if I were to refresh it now, this field would disappear. So that field is gone. So yeah, so the data API, we are not using the data API. So long-winded answer to your question. Any other questions?
Vince, you said that you're relying on the audit log to get all your timestamps of created, modified information, not just timestamps, but people too. But what happens if somebody elects in the management screen here not to have any fields in a particular table set for auditing?
To not have any fields set for auditing? Okay. So that would mean that the record would get transacted, right? So the edits would still happen. So create and edit and view and delete at the table level would still happen. And so transactional data would get in. You just wouldn't see the audits, but the record, the transaction timestamp would happen and the record would be there. So you'd still have a timestamp that you can go off of, because I think the key would be that you have at least at the table level that you're capturing an edit for that table. Otherwise, then at that point you wouldn't have the data. So yeah, does that make sense?
It does. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
So if you had an invoice solution, how do you figure out when that invoice was created and when that invoice was sent out?
So if you compare invoice to, let's say, project, right, and you have line items, comparatively, like project is invoice and tasks are line items on an invoice. So when I create this invoice, I get a transaction that tells me who created it. So like if I go in here and I create and I put in a budget, right? So I created this new project, right? And because of that, there's a created at and created by, and that's basically pulling data from this place here.
From the audit log.
Yeah, from the basically it's pulling it from the transaction table. Actually, it's pulling it based on the ID that's in the table, the audit table log, because we have.
So this goes back to the previous person's question.
Mm-hmm.
If no one's asking for transaction details to be logged, then how do you get creation dates and so forth into the places in your solution that you absolutely need them.
Yeah, so what we have is we have a transaction table, and then we have how do you say? How do I say this? Let's see, where is it? So we have a transaction table log, and we have a transaction table. Sorry, audit table log and an audit table, and those are different. So we have 5 components to kind of wire this up, and one is going to be the representation of this data. That's the audit tables. That's all these records. And audit field table is going to have all the fields in each of the tables, right? So so there's those 2 components, and then the log is the activity of any transactions that happen at the table level, and any transactions that field level transactions at this level.
And that
So,
contains
yeah,
the actual date and time modifications.
the date and time, because it's a transaction, it points back to the transaction. So all these fields, all these field log records, these are related to the table that they belong in, and this table is related to the transaction it's part of. And because of that, this is the timestamp of the transaction. And because it's all happened at this time, we're
Got it.
able to, get it from here. Yeah.
Okay, so you are logging date and time and who modified it and stuff like that all the time.
Yeah. I mean,
But
obviously,
you're not logging the changes like, oh, I changed Joe to John.
yeah, we're logging that here. So this
No.
stuff here,
So
yeah.
if you turn off the audit management
Yeah.
entirely,
Yes.
you stop tracking changes like first name was changed from John to Jack.
Yeah. So let's say this project, I say I'm not gonna log the name and the status. Okay. So now I go in here and I edit the project, and I change the status to something. I transact it. Okay. So then now it's approved. If I go here and I look at that last transaction, there's nothing logged here for the changes because I
Got it.
turned it off, right?
But
But however,
yeah,
I could
got
still
it.
see, I could still see who was the last person to modify it. Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, so your created and modified meta fields are coming from the transaction, not from the audit log, right?
Yes, yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
why you're saving n-1 on tables for date and time and etc. on all your tables. Because you have one location where you do have the date and time and who edited it.
Yes, we have one location for that. That's right. Isn't it n-1? Isn't it 4 minus n or something like that?
No, okay. For each table.
Yes.
Yes. So if you have 40 tables, these fields are not being stored in for 39 of the tables, but you have one table, this table,
Yes. Yeah.
with that information.
Yep. Yeah. I wish there was this capability in FileMaker that just like we have here, right? I wish we had that on the graph and tables over here. Create, edit, view, delete. And there would be an immutable table in FileMaker that would log, first off, who made any of these changes. Like someone came in and said they wanted to log views to this project record, and that gets logged as part of the log, or modifying the log itself and saying someone made the change to request that the logging happens, and that it would be as easy as that to just turn it on or off. Similarly with fields, right? You go into the fields and I would say I want to audit, any of these fields, and then that would be built into the graph. That would be friggin' amazing, and that would be so easy.
Well, what about a script step that just like said, just hold everything here and then dump it all over when it's ready or something like that?
Mm,
Scripting is slower,
Oh,
so you wouldn't want to implement it that way. But
okay.
yeah,
Vince always has wacky ideas to share.
yeah,
Well, script,
I-
yeah, well, it's got a whole lot of script steps here, so.
yeah. I mean, we have this it's continual, it's continually refinement and evolution of what we're doing and thinking with this. But this definitely is, how do you say, the best that we've ever done this approach. And in the past, what we were doing, and I kind of like the semi-transactional approach was, modify all the fields and then go to the parent record and commit all the data and then go to the parent record really quickly and then go find it and then update a timestamp and then all the calculation fields would have a trigger off that timestamp. So as soon as you update the timestamp and commit it, then all those calculated fields refresh, and then it kind of integrity of the calculations would come into effect then. However, there's a little bit of a window or a time gap where you might have put in some new tasks and you get to the project and accidentally find out that it's locked. Now you've got a problem because you have new tasks that you committed, but you can't update the project because it's locked by somebody.
So
So yeah.
I'd cast about 100 votes to have built-in audit logging.
Yeah.
Only 100? Come on, man. Cough up the dollars.
And that wouldn't just be on the data, that would be on everything. Your changing of the scripts, changing of the schema, changing.
Yeah.
So who
Yeah,
came in here?
I don't know that would
What?
should have audit logging, but some sort of mechanism to tie into like a mechanism that saves your changes. So like how you have dang, my brain is not working right now. Sorry, I'm eating. So
I'd be sorry.
so
Steve's hungry too.
We all do it.
yeah. So you know how Xcode or any other development tool ties into an environment where it records your textual changes to files? I think something like that would be more appropriate for that type of thing. That way you can roll back changes and do all sorts of things. Just like any other coder does.
I mean,
Oh, there was a product that used to do that for us too. I forget the name of it. We bought it. It was Audit. Get the name of the company that provided it.
Sync Deck, wasn't it? Sync
Yeah,
Deck?
Sync Deck. That's right. And they had a different name, I think, before that even.
Yeah. But
It's like SVN and Git and I'm trying to think of the generic name for that.
but
Repos.
yeah. So with all this stuff, I look at it at two levels. I look at it as like, oh, okay, the basic mechanics of it is easy to understand. The hard stuff is getting some of these other things really working. And someone mentioned, I think it was at .fmp, that, oh, well, you have the mechanics for rollback, right? And it's like, wow, okay, my mind starts reeling, thinking like, wow, rollback, okay. Like, okay, so we have all these audits, right? We have all these transactions. If we played these transactions back, we could roll the data back, right? But now that's just the data. What if, as part of the the mix of things, like I added that field that didn't exist before, right? Now, you know what I mean? It's like, I would have to know about the schematic changes as well to be able to roll this system back, you know, completely. I mean, just rolling back the data is one thing. You know, if I deleted the field and I go back and I still have data transacted for that field, I'm trying to set a field that doesn't exist anymore. So it's a complicated problem. I don't, you know, we didn't try to undertake solving the problem of rollbacks with all this. We didn't think of that.
I wanted to go back to Vince's date and time thing.
Okay,
The
this thing.
just so everyone understands, that date field is a relationship, and which means that there are, I don't know, roughly 12 records there right now. And that means that 12 lookups are code for those dates.
Actually, Keith, that's not a relationship. What we're using is we're using the execute data API. We're giving this ID, and we have a layout that has data for the audit table and the IDs that were done and what transaction it belonged to. And so it pulls back a JSON object of the first record. I mean, it pulls that back all the records that this ID was in the transaction history. And then from there, we just pull the first ID, the first number field, sorry, the first timestamp and the last timestamp. And then we present that here in this window. So there's no relationships to get this data, by the way.
So this date column?
This here? Yeah, so let me show
No,
you.
not up there.
Oh, okay. Which one?
See that date field? Third column in.
This one? Oh, this one. This date field. That is the date of the project. That's like I'm gonna create a date here.
Okay, that's stored date.
That's an attribute. That's an attribute in that
Got it.
table.
Okay.
Yeah. So this
So when you click on
button, when I click on this
pop-up,
button, I
you
get
go
this
out.
popover.
You go out, grab the data, and display it.
Yes, correct. And we go grab the data from this variable. Again, I mean, this could be done a little bit differently, but we just have it in this global variable. It could be done as a window attribute, and then it's belonging to this window, etc. But anyway, this for demo purposes, this is how we're doing it here. And so there's no relationship to this data. It's pulled on the fly. So like I could click on this row and say, when was the, you know, this was the, when it was created, this was when modified it, etc.
Okay, so if you do have an invoice solution, how do we find the invoices generated today?
And
how
let's see, you'd have to find the transactions. Yeah, I mean, I haven't thought about it, but I think there would be a way to do it using the log of transactions for those keys. By the way, our keys have some descriptive attribute, like you see here, one of the keys. It always has a prefix of the table it belongs to. So in a sense, we just don't have the UUID component. We also have a description for what table this key belongs to. So I think I'd have to think about it, but there would be a way to probably solve that problem. Not ideal, but I hear you. That could be an issue.
yeah, dates are so important in a system. So
yeah,
I'm trying to think about what gotchas you got.
yeah, that's a good one. I'd have to think about it and get back to you on it. See if there would be. I mean, from a user perspective, it definitely would be a bummer to have to search on it in a different place to get back what you need, etc. Anyway, I'd have to think about it a little bit and get back to you. Anyway, just a couple of last slides to real talk about, and then we'll wrap up real quick here. So in preparing for this demo, I took some data and I built a list. This is a body part here. That's a header. This is a footer down here. And I had 1,056 records, and I had some related data. So I have sales of coffee beans or tea, and these sales, how many sales in each of these countries, what the total sales were, how much they were, the budget was, and what the remaining amount was. And so these three calculations here are all unstored, and all these three calculations also have summary fields at the top to make matters worse. And so if I host this file somewhere on a server and I want to see these summary numbers at the top, we're talking only 1,056 records. This is the performance if you were to go from unstored to stored. So unstored, and then I did these tests when I was in Germany, 663 seconds to view that list of 1,056 records versus stored 4.8 seconds. And the amount of bytes sent and received is also pretty dramatic. And what it looks like in terms of visual representation using Keynote with all these numbers, it's pretty significant, right? So if you can use transactions efficiently to move from unstored to stored, if you have any views like this, you'd be basically delivering way faster performance and a huge savings in network traffic. Anyway, this is going into the release debug thing, and anyway, that's it. That's all I have in terms of discussion.
What's with Beaker?
Beaker is my inspiration. He's the one who always kind of he's like my little mascot, willing to put him through the ringer. Mark, you had a comment. I didn't see the comment. What was it?
He's gonna argue.
Oh,
He's
I
gonna
was
argue.
I was just saying, in terms of capturing metadata, which you're not doing, and Keith brought up that you may need that metadata if you want to find invoice date. And I was just suggesting that if it's important to know what the invoice date is, you'd probably be storing that as a value in the system, independent of the fact that it also happens to be the record creation date. In other words, you're not
Yeah.
record creation date because you're not capturing invoice. Of course, that's an important date, and you're likely to want to search on it. So you'd probably go ahead and have an invoice date field that captures that,
Yes.
and that you could then search on.
Yes. Good point. But also worth noting that sometimes there's metrics that people want to see. I don't know how many users are creating invoices, how many people modified invoices, those kinds of things, those kinds of analytics. If we were to take all the data, the audit data, into some kind of reporting tool, you could get that number back, those insights. So if that was important, that could be done. But good point, Mark. Thank you. Anyway, Beaker is my mascot, and I just like his surprised look. We always are evolving this and expanding and expounding on it. So I'm hoping at some point we can share this more fully. But right now it's still kind of, there's still gears are turning and thoughts are kind of wanting to refine it even further. So, but that's the goal.
But you're using these methods in production now?
Yeah, 2 systems in production right now. Actually, 1 system. Wait a minute. 3. One is in production. 1 is being developed, about 60% done, and another one is I don't know the state of it, but it's in production as well.
And
Slightly different, but very
and
similar.
performance was the big driver to get that working?
Oh yeah. So one of the systems where it's in production right now, about 3 or 4, no, maybe 5 years ago, the team said to us, it's just a lot of numbers. It's just a lot of numbers, finance numbers, and that kind of thing. And the team said, we were trying all kinds of things to make it to make it faster. And until we got to tackle the stored versus unstored issue, the team said, basically, if you can't make it faster, we're off this. We're going to find another solution.
Oh.
And the team is in the solution is in use by, I don't know, 100 to 120 people, and mostly in California, but everywhere around the world. Asia, Australia, Europe, Canada, Mexico, everywhere. And users log in from all over the place. And since we switched to this approach, we've had some areas where we needed to tweak performance, but that conversation is long gone now. They stayed with the platform, and things have been really good. So,
was there any other solution you were considering at the same time that like this?
I think we have a web team, and the thought was maybe the web team would build like a web application for them.
Okay.
But that didn't go there. We managed to solve the problem. Yeah. Again, I would reiterate that the key factor is to be able to measure. That's an important thing that in the community, like as a community, we need tools to be able to measure so that we can see the impact that where was it? The impact that these changes have. This is all using release debug, the debug.log data to get these insights. Using this native FileMaker approach versus again denormalizing, storing the data, and the impact that has. So yeah.
Well, thanks, Vince.
Yeah, you're very welcome, and I hope everybody enjoyed it. And yeah, so stay tuned. We may have a change of time for maybe next month, maybe not next month, but hopefully we'll get the announcement earlier this time.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, at least we have an idea of what's going to happen in the next few months, so we'll.
Yes, that's getting planned out better.
Earlier.
And yes, thanks for reminding me, Sean. That was brought up. The emojis in the graph. Unfortunately, they do not work in Windows, and that's a bummer. And
so no emojis at all in Windows, huh?
No,
Sean,
they would work if you found a font that supported them.
But like on the graph and some other places, they're like calculation.
Yeah, where you can't choose the font that's being used there.
Right.
You can't choose the font in Windows for the graph, because you can on a Mac, right?
No.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Yeah, you're talking for the
join graph.
Yeah.
Oh, but I'm saying emojis
boxes those text boxes, I guess.
On the text boxes. I'm not talking about like on the text boxes, you can choose the font. Am I making sense?
Yeah, sorry, I was including everything in the join graph. But you were talking about labels.
Hmm.
I'm talking about here. Let me share my screen one second to clarify that. I'm talking about in the join graph, when you go to here, this is a text object.
Yeah.
You can put emojis in here.
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Yeah, so you can put
So,
emojis there.
so if you found a font, even on Windows, that included the second page of Unicode. So there's 2 pages right now.
Hmm.
There's 64,000 characters in the first page and 64,000 in the second.
Uh-huh.
And the things like Klingon and whatever on this second page, along with emojis and other things. But all the real languages are on the first page.
I see.
So if you found a font that defined those, and there's supposed to be a standard, like all the characters are numbered. So let's say character 70,000 is an
Uh-huh.
emoji. It's supposed to be the same character on both platforms, defined by the Unicode standard.
Okay.
So if you found a font, it should work.
And here in this, so usually we put emojis also in our comments here. Sean, do you know if this works on Windows? Can I put an emoji?
I haven't tested. I was
Okay.
just going off of a comment someone else made in the, I think it was
Yeah.
the .fmp presentation.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't use Windows. So I don't know if these actually show up on Windows. I'd have to, but yeah, okay.
Yeah, if you're a Mac user, you can look at all the characters. There's a
Yeah.
application called Unicode Checker, and you can find it on the internet. And every font, you can change the font, and you can change what character you're looking at, and decide your font to use. There's a lot of empty space in both of the pages, so you might see a lot of question mark boxes. Those are undefined characters. But I haven't updated my version in a while, and this is only doing the first page. I think.
Hmm. Okay. So that's a Mac application? The
Yeah, it's a
Unicode
Mac
Checker?
app called Unicode Checker. I use a lot of funky characters too. I don't tend to use I like your checkbox, by the way, but that's
Hmm.
in there somewhere. I mean, it's a lot of tens of thousands of characters to look through.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
it's a Mac app called Unicode Checker. It's all one word.
Okay.
And it's been out ever since Unicode existed.
Okay. Is it by Earthling Soft? Does that sound right? Yeah.
Let me look at the about box here.
Okay. Explore and convert Unicode.
Yep, that's it.
Unicode Checker. Yeah.
Earthling Soft.
So this, oh, there you go. Sam already posted it. Cool. All right. Well, something to explore. Cool. Any last questions before we wrap it up? Keith, it was nice to have you tonight. Thank you for joining.
Yeah. Sorry about pushing your buttons, but got to keep you honest.
No, it's good.
Yeah.
Makes our meeting better than everybody else's.
Well, there's probably other FileMaker people going to the other meetings, right?
Yeah, but no engineers from Claris.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Kent asked, sorry, go ahead.
I only do this because it's at night, by the way. It's on my own time, and no one can complain about me not spending time on the things I'm supposed to be working on.
So is that one vote for keeping it in the evening?
Yes.
Okay.
I got so many presentations in already. I don't think I'm going to be presenting for a while. So if I'm in Germany, I don't know. We'll see. So it's way too late for me.
We'll get you
Anyway.
somehow.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, Kent had a question about some button that was labeled as scorched earth. I think it just truncates all the data and wipes everything out, and I think that's what it does. I'd have to double check, but yeah. And okay, cool. Yeah, it's been quite a journey, and I'm really happy with where we are. And I would like to also mention that there's a lot of talent behind all of what you've seen today. A lot of talent from Brendan Pierce, Alec Gregory, Nat Robinson, and many other people on our team that have contributed to different offshoots of components of it and making it better. So it's constantly evolving, but we're really happy with where it's at, and there's some exciting things for the future of it. So hopefully not too long in the near future, we'll have something that we can actually share with the community, hopefully. Anyway, cool. Thank you for your time. Hope, have a great day wherever you are, and see you at the next one.
Yeah, I'm just checking my emojis now. My emojis showed up
Oh yeah.
in Windows. They're not
Oh,
full
cool.
color though, and
Oh,
I was
they're
just
like
gonna
little
say
black
that.
and white things. Yeah, they look.
Could you
I
show
just
it to us,
opened
Eric?
the remote desktop.
Could you show it to us, Eric?
Yeah, sure. Let's see. How do I?
Isn't this just another reason to be developing on a Mac?
So,
To get color emoji. Come on, it's
so just
you know,
to give you an
why have one
idea,
hand behind your back, really?
every font vendor defines what that emoji is supposed to look like.
Let's
So
see.
the consortium says it's supposed to represent this, but the fact that the Mac is so colorful, etc.,
Yeah.
is really
Oh wait, that's the wrong one.
that's that's Mac.
Yeah, that's Mac. Wait just a second. I need to switch over. Sorry.
It's okay.
Where do we? How do we? How do I
You
stop
just choose a
sharing?
different window.
Stop sharing. Pick the wrong window.
Either that or Eric thinks he's been working on a Windows machine for the last 20 years, but he's really been on a Mac.
They fooled me.
Just
There, you see that one?
Oh yeah, it's like they're anemic or something.
Yeah, it's like DOS.
They're there.
do you know what character that is?
Oh, the one that looks like a box? I think it was a heart or something.
No, the box with the question mark in it is an undefined character.
Oh.
So that particular character is not defined, but the
I don't
others
see a
are.
box with question mark. I don't see a box with a question mark.
Well, the font's really small. I can't see it.
That first
Yeah.
one is a box with a plus in it, and then it looks like
zoom in on the graph.
Oh yeah, here you can see it on here too, right?
yeah. So the box with a plus in it. Then there's hearts, a magnifying
weird.
glass,
Oh, that
fox.
one doesn't even show up.
Which one? The one?
Well, like the one that's just a box.
Oh yeah, that's
Yeah, and some of
that's
these things
weird.
they're just indistinguishable. Like I guess that's a rabbit. Maybe
Yeah,
that's a box.
that location is a standard text edit control from Windows. So we have like zero control of the ability of that little scrolling window.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I'm looking at open remote desktop, a Windows session for one of our scripts where we have some emojis in comments.
Oh, you do have
You know,
emojis
like-
in comments.
Yeah, like, you know, we've got an exit loop if, and there's a comment line with a red, you know, stop sign for an error, and it just shows up as a black octagon with a black outline.
Hmm.
We've got some of the, you know, construction border emojis, and they're just showing up as black and white, like line drawings instead of the yellow.
Oh, I see. Hmm. Right.
Yeah, it's like
Definitely
a simplified
probably.
version of everything.
All right. Keith, I don't know what you're waiting for. Let's get emojis in there.
That's all the font vendors. Sorry, guys.
Okay.
Top priority over at Claris.
Oh, cool.
Oh wait,
Is
you
that,
got some.
Sean?
They look
Sean,
like
is that yours?
little chairs or something.
Yeah, see.
Mm,
Those are those like
the
street
stop
those
sign.
street yeah, no, yeah, those little street
Oh,
or whatever.
under construction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, but you can't tell. If you didn't know that, you wouldn't know what that is in Windows.
Yeah.
But you got the check mark in there. So
Yeah.
so that's the same character that Vince is using, and ours is colorful on
Yeah.
Mac and black and white on Windows.
So who's responsible for the color?
The point of this is like this is supposed to be red to say
Yeah.
an error, and this one's supposed to be green for success. And
Oh.
that just goes away. And these are yellow.
Yellow warning
Guys.
roadblock signs. Yeah.
I mean, isn't everything's like a touch uglier in Windows, isn't it?
So
Touch.
the font vendors draw those. You have to realize that like outline fonts are called that for a reason. They're a drawing, they're not a character. Every single character position is literally a drawing that someone drew with a drawing program.
And even the emoji standards are basically a description of the picture, and then it's up to each vendor. That's why emojis look different on an iPhone or an Android or in Facebook Messenger, because each vendor gets to draw them however they want based on the description.
Interesting. So what makes it that there's no color?
The font vendor decided to not have color.
Oh,
It's that simple.
But
okay.
But that's on Windows. It should be the same font on Windows, right?
It's made by another vendor.
Hmm.
Apple uses one brand, and they actually have a contract with them, I believe, that says you'll do this for us. And Apple pays through the nose for the font vendor to do that.
Make it pretty or else.
Is that Keith, is that Menlo that you're talking about, the font?
It's every font on the Mac, I believe, supports. Can you open up that file on the Mac? Or is this just a Windows only environment?
Yeah, he looks like he's.
This would be Sean. I think this is Sean's screen.
So if I'm right, I forget, but that possibly could be Arial on the Windows side.
I mean,
on the well, those text boxes and on the graph, that's Arial.
well, you could choose what you want it to be. I mean, I
No,
just happen to be.
I'm saying this.
You can't choose in the script workspace though.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm just saying we use the standard fonts that Microsoft asks us to use in every dialogue. So I believe that's
like a monospace font of some sort.
That's not a monospace font.
Well, it was until we put the emojis in there.
Yeah. Yeah, look at the size of the stop sign, and then look at the width of the eye.
Yeah.
But everywhere where there's text only, I think they're all the same width.
No, this is not a monospace font.
Yeah, that's not a monospace font. Yep.
So here, granted, on the Mac, I've also got Monkey Bread installed, but
Oh yeah,
You can see the
Yeah.
emojis are showing up with color.
right. Same thing. Oh. I learned something new.
Yeah.
So it's just a font. Go ahead and grab that text on the Mac, like on the exit loop if. Grab that text out of there. Yeah, and then put it in a field in a new file or whatever, and then play different. Duplicate the field out and change the field to a few different field fonts.
I'm curious how this
Oh,
prints
okay.
too, because that prints to a different font too, by the way.
Oh yeah, we hardly
And-
ever do that. So
Yeah, and if you're printing to a color printer or not, and I don't know if we send it out.
Did you guys say you never print your scripts?
I print it to PDF all the time.
Yeah, same here, trying to find
Oh.
stuff.
oh, we're in FM Perception all the time. So
Oh,
and I've got the 2Empower plugin to find stuff.
Does this not all go back to the Bill Gates credo that no one really needs a graphic user interface for a mouse anyway? So we'll just do it, we'll lower the bar and do exactly the bare minimum to make it work on Windows. And yes, I do have an Apple sticker on my car for full disclosure.
Okay, I think we've thoroughly meeting
Enough fun
this
with
out.
emojis?
Beat up the emojis.
yeah, we're
Meet
yeah
up
we're
the
back down
emojis.
to it. We're 11 participants now. So.
All
We
right.
still recording?
The true
Yeah.
geeks amongst us.
Oh yeah, we're all in trouble now. This all
Time
going
for
to
my
the internet.
yeah. Time to